Right, guys, it's that time of the week again. We are back with another episode from the Fantasy Kickabout. And this week it is something a little bit different. I'm joined by David O'Hara, Liverpool fan for anyone that listens to the podcast, and myself, Gary Quinn, Manchester United fan. So, what we said this week is we'll do something a little bit different. We will kind of go ask each other questions based on game week one, game week two. Both of us will give our opinions on it and we'll jump back and forth between questions. Does that sound good to you, O'Hara?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah.
I will leave it to you with the opening question from your long list.
Grant. Right, I'll kick it off. So with fresh news from today, what do you make of the news that Kane has come out and said, "Oh yeah, I'm 100% committed to Tottenham. Yeah, I'm going to give it Everton now this season." After the whole summer of the saga, looking very likely he was going to go to City. Yeah, what do you make of it now? So he's a committed Tottenham player, so it seems.
It's an interesting one in a sense that I did think Daniel Levy would cave and would accept 130 million this week. Obviously, he hasn't. I don't know whether it was true that a bid of 150 million, I think it might have been 150 million euro that went in. So obviously that wasn't accepted. Kane has come out on his Instagram social media saying that he's here to stay. He's 100% committed to the cause. Kind of had to say it. But when you base everything on his interview with Gary Neville at the end of last season, I think that was with 2 games to go, kind of everything surrounding him returning from the Euros, I kind of just expected him to go, to be honest. And I expected City to eventually cough up the 150 million that Daniel Levy was looking for. Obviously, that's not the case. He's there to stay. Personally, I think no matter how professional you are as a footballer, when a big decision like that kind of turns into where it seems like he had his heart set on leaving, that he will still give 100%, but it'll take him a bit of time to kind of be as focused as he would have normally been in a Spurs shirt. So that might take a bit of time. But again, I suppose we're kind of used to Harry Kane not scoring in August, September. So maybe come October, he could be banging in the goals again. It was interesting, actually. That was my first question on the back of the fresh news as well. Whether, and this obviously I'll throw it back to you, O'Hara, whether Kane can keep his focus throughout the year, maybe steer Spurs towards a top 4 finish after their impressive start, and whether he could potentially win the Golden Boot.
Yeah, I think he's definitely in with the shout. Like, obviously, I'm not his biggest fan, but you can't deny, like, he's an absolute goal machine. So yeah, I really thought he was going to go to City. Obviously there was such an amount of talk about it for weeks and weeks, especially since the Euros. And I just felt there was, even like say from today, there's still such an amount of time till the transfer window closes that you just kind of felt, oh, surely it'll get done at some point. But yeah, I think if it's a case that he is going to stay at Tottenham, even if it's a case of it takes him a few weeks to kind of get the motivation back, he's absolutely going to score a load, because his mentality is just to score goals. He's very much, he reminds me quite of Alan Shearer, just in terms of, just seems to have his eyes set on breaking goal scoring records. I'm surprised now that he isn't going to go, because like he's 28 now, he'll be 29 next summer, when, the fact that he's not leaving now, a lot of us are like, oh, well, that just means, Daniel Levy said, oh yeah, give us one more year and you can leave next year, kind of a thing. But, like that, he'll be 29 next year. Definitely not past it or over the hill or anything like that, but you still would have thought 28 kind of would have been the last time pretty much his last chance for a massive kind of a transfer. And like, say, for example, if City were to come back from next year, you wouldn't be thinking it'd be the same kind of figures that were bandied about this summer. They might be looking for maybe 100. No, and Daniel Levy, they definitely will, but it'll be harder to justify that he's worth that, especially because there is all the hype about him, but at the end of the day, you'd forget he does still go through a couple of injury patches most seasons. So he's gonna bang in the goals. I'm glad he's staying at Tottenham because I think he's far less likely to win anything, and also help City to win the league. I think him not going to City keeps it much more in play for the other title challengers like Liverpool and United and Chelsea. But yeah, so I'm glad he's staying because I don't think even with the amount of goals he'll score that Tottenham will challenge at all. I'd be very, very surprised to see them anywhere near top 4, like top 6. I'd say is probably the pinnacle of what they can aim for. So yeah, so from the point of view of not being a fan of him, that makes me happy because he'll continue to not win any trophies, but he'll likely be I would think it'll be either him or Salah for top scorer, and Lukaku as well. Even still, with Kane kind of having a rocky start to the season.
It's on that, I suppose. You were obviously mentioning Kane, 29 next season, potentially look for a move. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up spending his whole career now at Spurs, because obviously from a Man United perspective, if Kane went to City, that opened the door for Haaland next season, because of obviously his buyout clause is then reduced to 70 million, I think it is 70 million from next season onwards. But next season, you can see now City going for Haaland, potentially Lewandowski as well, saying he wants a new challenge. There's a lot of options. Mbappe potentially could be, like, you never know. He could end up at Man City because they're probably the only team that could realistically afford the transfer fee and maybe the wages as well. So then it could be a case of Kane ends up at United or ends up staying at Spurs. So that's why I think it will be really, really interesting come next summer to see what actually happens. But I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up spending his whole career at Spurs after all this bit of a mess of the last 2-3 weeks for Everton and Spurs.
No, I totally agree, because like that, it could just be a case of it ends up that he has missed his window for a big transfer. And like that, if someone isn't going to come in for him next season, it'll just be a case of then with his sights just on all the goal scoring records, that he'll just be like, okay, look, I'm just going to have to basically do a sheer, and in terms of to be looking at breaking any of those records, it's in my best interest to just stay at Tottenham for the rest of my career. So yeah, I'll hit you now. So going in from one goal scorer to what seems like the next big thing, although he's nothing new to us in the league. Lukaku announced himself pretty well, didn't he? A goal within 15 minutes, and for all intents and purposes, like the performance itself was, he just absolutely dominated. I think he had 8 shots in the game, and 7 of them I think were inside the box, which just tells you, even though he only got 1 goal, I think it's pretty frightening going forward. What do you think of him being back in a Chelsea shirt?
At United, and it probably wasn't the most successful period of his career, but he did score goals. He is a goal scorer. He is a great goal scorer, but it's I think he potentially could suit Chelsea. It's kind of hard to know, as we were chatting just before we came on here. They were saying obviously he bullied the Arsenal defence, as you used the word, dominated the game. but it's against a very, very poor Arsenal team. So I'm kind of wouldn't be getting overly excited. I think the real challenge obviously will be this Sunday against Van Dijk. But I suppose you want to be seeing the best goal scorers in the Premier League. So obviously he's there. From a competitive side, you don't want to see it because obviously Man United, Liverpool will be competing with the likes of Chelsea this season for the Premier League. What I'd be really, really interested to see is that whether he's improved his overall game in terms of his touch, because his touch at times was pure awful at United, and it would slow down a lot of United's attacks because his touch was so poor. So it'd be interesting to see, has that improved, and in terms of the build-up play at Chelsea. But again, he's going to have the likes of pacey wingers, Pulisic, Ziyech, running off, from wing backs as well, potentially bombing up the field. So it will be really, really interesting to see how he gets on. He'll definitely be scoring goals. He'll be definitely up there with the likes of a Harry Kane or a Mo Salah for top scorer this season. But like I said, the most interesting thing is to see is whether he actually improved. And yeah, he went over to Italy and he pretty much owned the league in terms of the amount of goals and assists that he got, especially last season. But again, I almost feel like it's a vendetta nearly against the Premier League, and especially when he comes up against United, I think his aim will be to score a goal. His aim will be to cup his ear to the crowd and shush them as much as he can. But he'll want to, I think he has personal pride as well, that he wants to come back to the Premier League and prove that, yeah, he went away, kind of learned his trade and came back a better player. So it'll be interesting to see. But that kind of runs on to the next question. I might throw it your way, O'Hara. Obviously, Van Dijk versus Lukaku. How do you see that battle going? Because obviously it's a fascinating game, Liverpool Chelsea, after the first couple of games of the Premier League season. But can you see Lukaku getting the better of? I don't know whether you'd agree on this or not, but we still haven't seen Van Dijk test it in terms of twisting and turning, because he had a pretty easy game against Norwich on the opening day of the season, and it was pretty easy going, I think, as well last weekend for them. So he hasn't really been challenged. What way do you see the Van Dijk versus Lukaku battle going?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be cool to see that type of battle, because it's been a while since there's been kind of, I suppose, one of the stereotypical kind of powerhouse strikers in the league. Me personally, I think Van Dijk wins it hands down. Like, obviously Lukaku has been in the league for plenty of years before, but he has been away for a couple of years. So I just think kind of Van Dijk will be like, yeah, look, this is my league, and we're just letting you back into it. So I'd say, he won't have it, or Lukaku won't have an easy ride of it. I'd say. I think it's interesting in terms of, like, I'd agree with you. We haven't, kind of been, Liverpool haven't been tested in terms of, like, out and out kind of pacey wingers, or like that Lukaku, a big kind of powerful forward. But it's funny, kind of, if you're looking from the outside in, we've had two quite straightforward wins to start the season. But if you're actually watching the games, like, Burnley was a tough game, so like, obviously we came out of it with a nice 2-0 win. On paper looks happy days. That's a straightforward win, and by the end of the game it was, but it was a tough old slog to actually get there. We were realistically, kind of, even when it was coming up to half time, I was kind of thinking we're a little bit lucky. Not lucky in terms of that we didn't deserve it, but we were lucky to be 1-0 up and to have gone 1-0 up relatively early in the game, just in the context of the game, in terms of, had it been 0-0 coming up to half time, it would have been like, this is going to be a really hard game, because they were really testing us. Like we were fortunate to be 1-0 up, because they were really, really testing us. And in fairness, they had a few chances as well. So Van Dijk kind of had his work cut out for himself and Matip. Burnley, are probably one of the most physical teams in the league. Dijks has them playing kind of retro football, kind of. But no, so yeah, I think it'll be an interesting one. But I think Van Dijk's ready for it, and after Burnley last week, kind of has a bit of a preparation, ready for it. I'm going to throw one at you, and it's one I only it didn't seem to be widely talked about in the media, but I only saw the other day. I presume you've seen, but have you heard James Rodriguez? I'm not sure what platform it was on. I think it was Twitch or something. It wasn't, one of the straightforward social medias, but I think he was doing some sort of a Q&A, or he just replied to someone that he didn't know. He said he didn't know who Everton were playing this weekend. That he basically doesn't consider himself part of the team. And he was like, "Oh, Everton, I don't even know who they're playing this weekend." Which I was surprised wasn't just widely publicized, because I just found it's so disrespectful to your club. Like, obviously, if he's thinking selfishly from his point of view, he's kind of like, oh well, kind of feeling sorry for himself. Like Ancelotti, keeps bringing him around like a plant from an old house or something like that. But Ancelotti's gone, and Rodriguez hasn't lit it up at Everton, so he definitely is out of luck with the Ancelotti train, in terms of he's not good enough to, for Real to be looking for him to come back. So yeah, what do you think? What would you think if one of your players kind of came out? And like, in fairness, he's a top class player, or top class talent. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't seem to really have the attitude to actually be a top class player, but he definitely has the talent. So, like, say when Pogba was kind of in and out of the team, and kind of jury was out on him, like, how would you have felt if someone of the same ilk of Rodriguez comes out and is like, oh, I couldn't even care less who we're playing this weekend?
Strange one, because I suppose, like, first of all, I'm going to apologize for Rafa Benitez. I don't know who Everton playing this weekend either, but I think James Rodriguez I just think he's old news at this stage. He had his first, 2 months, which was pretty impressive for Everton, and then just spiraled downhill. Do I see him as a Rafa Benitez? And you probably could answer this better. As a Rafa Benitez type player, I can't. And I think they've been trying to get him off the books at, even I think they were looking for, was it 15, 20 million? But yeah, like, it's, I don't know. Like, I don't think his heart was ever at Everton, to be honest. So I'm not really surprised the fact that he doesn't know who Everton are playing this weekend. Does it really bother the Evertonians? Probably it does, but then again, it probably doesn't, because he's probably not going to be in around the team anymore, or as much as he was last season. He's injury prone. He's always picking up niggles and injuries here. Was it something to do with like shaved legs or something, that got an infection in it, or something ridiculous like that?
Oh yeah, he got an ingrown hair or something like that, didn't he?
Something crazy along those lines. So not really surprised by it, but also I don't think it's very professional to throw it out in your own Q&A on whatever platform he was using.
Yeah.
I can't see him being a big part. I can't see him being a big part of Everton's squad this season, especially under Benitez.
You'd nearly forget about him, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, 100%. And to be honest, when you mentioned him, I was like, Oh yeah, James Rodriguez, Everton, forgot about that.
Yeah.
And I think his price has been dropped on FPL as well. So he's not really geared up for a good season.
No.
But I suppose it kind of brings it on to the question I had just in relation to Everton, and you'd obviously know as a Liverpool fan a bit more about Rafa Benitez. To us United fans, he's just a fat Spanish waiter. So
Oh, oh, we don't like that.
so I was just going to say, like, can Rafa kind of win over the Evertonians, especially after the opening two games? I know it was a 2-2 draw against them, against the energetic lead side, but also the 3-1 win on the opening day of the season against against Southampton. Can you see Rafa winning over the Evertonians after his start?
I think so. Like he's a good man. He's a very good manager. You know, like he kind of gets an unfair reputation, kind of. I suppose. Just I don't know. People kind of forget kind of what he has achieved. You know what I mean? Um, Obviously some of it is going back a few years, but again, that's often the thing with Mourinho as well. Um, obviously he came in and won the Champions League with Liverpool, but that was off the back of having won the Spanish league with Valencia. Which if you said to anyone now would be bizarre. Like the only ones you could ever consider are Madrid and Barca, and obviously Atletico every couple of years as well. Um, and came in at Chelsea and won the Europa League, and really Newcastle should have gotten him in a couple of weeks beforehand, and I think he definitely would have saved them from relegation when he initially came in. And wasn't too big of an ego to stay with them and get them promoted again. Like really, he'd still be at Newcastle had Mike Ashley not just totally pissed him off. But no, I think he can. I think it's a very very good manager. Obviously we'll always love him. But even off the field, he was obviously a brilliant manager for Liverpool, but he loves the city and he loves the fans. He's always been a big kind of supporter of the Hillsborough kind of charities, and he'd always kind of go. When the memorials were still going on, he used to always still go to them, even when he wasn't Liverpool manager anymore and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, we'll have a soft spot for him, but thinking managerial wise, he's a very very good manager. He mightn't be everyone's cup of tea. Like you were saying, I'd agree with you. Rodriguez does not strike me as a Rafa player. And he apparently is very good at being a man manager, but he has quite a different style of man managing than say Klopp, for example. Klopp is very hands on, like making you feel good about yourself, giving you a big hug, being like, yeah, you're the best. Where Rafa, from what I've seen and heard and read, kind of from the likes of Carragher and Gerrard, is more kind of tough love, kind of, and kind of feels that's the best way to get the best out of someone and to motivate them. Like Gerrard always felt, according to him, that he kind of never felt Rafa loved him. Like a lot of players would go on about that, like needing to kind of feel loved to get the best out of themselves. Where Gerrard felt he was kind of this, he was there for 6-7 years, so kind of this father figure almost, but in terms of always wanting to impress him and never feeling that he fully was.
Something about, so wasn't it something to do with Steven Gerrard after the Istanbul, obviously Liverpool winning the Champions League that night? But was there something about him kind of coming into the dressing room afterwards and Benitez like not even like nearly acknowledging him? Or was there some story around that? I think I remember reading it somewhere, as in that was the kind of the man management skills of that he had. He was nearly telling Steven Gerrard what he'd done wrong, as opposed to praising him for what he did right.
A little bit, yeah. What it kind of struck me about him, it was, or from what I've heard, kind of, yeah, it'd be more, he never ever kind of let himself dwell in the moment, even if it was like that. He was just have to win in the Champions League. He was thinking of, he's still always kind of thinking of motivating the players and what's coming next. So that kind of a story wouldn't surprise me in terms of, obviously inwardly he's delighted, and obviously thought Gerrard was amazing because he had him as his captain. He built the team around Gerrard. Gerrard was the absolute main man at the time. But with that sort of scenario, even though they had just won the Champions League, Rafa in his head would be like, yeah, that was amazing, but you're the quality of player that this is what we should be aiming for every year. This is what you should be striving to. So it was almost like, obviously again in a different kind of way, but it's similar to when Liverpool got top four in Klopp's first season. Was it first season? No, his second season. Sorry. We beat Middlesbrough on the last day of the season 3-0, and that meant we were back in the Champions League. That got us fourth place, and we hadn't been there in about 3 or 4 years. And obviously everyone was celebrating because happy days were back in the Champions League where Liverpool feel they belong. And obviously actually went on to the final that year, which is when they lost to Madrid and Kiev. But while we were celebrating getting Champions League, and Klopp was like, yeah, it is brilliant, but we shouldn't really celebrate. This is what we should be getting every year. We should be, like, Liverpool is one of the biggest clubs in the world. We should be top four every year. So yeah, sorry, we're going off on a tangent there, but it was just kind of drawing comparisons between that type of man management. But yeah, so I think in terms of Rafa at Everton, I think he'll do well. I think it's unlikely he'll be there a long time because I think, in fairness to them, and Liverpool fans would, obviously rip the piss out of Everton fans as well with the local rivalry and stuff. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of, contrary to popular belief, there is actually a few Everton fans who have their heads screwed on and are actually logical football fans. So I'd say there'll be a decent portion of them kind of are like, look, yeah, he used to be Liverpool manager, but like that was 10, 11 years ago. He's been to numerous clubs since. He's a top quality manager. And with Rodrguez as an example, he wouldn't be the most attacking minded manager. So I'd say he'll make them quite solid defensively. But that'll be good because it'll make them a hard team to play against. They already have a lot of good defenders. So I'd say it wouldn't be that difficult to make them solid to play against. But I think long term, he won't be there that long, really. I wouldn't expect, like, he'll be there the full season, I would expect. But I wouldn't say enough of the crowd will warm to him. I'd say, like, even if they're warm to him, they'll only kind of just about warm to him. He'll never be loved there, and there'll still be pockets of fans who absolutely hate the fact that he's there and think it's ridiculous. But no, there was obviously the question, like, when he was linked with it from a Liverpool fan's point of view, what would you feel? How would you feel if he did go to Everton? And it was a weird one at the time because it's like, oh, that'll be surely not. But it'd be really strange to see him as the Everton manager. It still is really strange to see him as the Everton manager.
Would you say the difference there is because Everton aren't competing with Liverpool? Like, yeah. For example, we'd say at times maybe when Benitez was there, Everton were pushing for that top four or trying to get into Europe, competing with Liverpool at times. So that obviously is probably a big factor for you Liverpool fans, that the fact that it's almost like with the rumours going around with Cristiano Ronaldo potentially going to City, that would hurt a lot of Man United fans because City are right up there, obviously winning stuff ahead of United at the moment. But you take examples of Peter Schmeichel, Andy Cole, when they moved to Man City, City weren't competing with Man United at the time. So not as many Man United fans were disgusted by those transfers or felt that they were traders or this, that, and the other. But would that be something similar maybe
Yeah,
for
definitely. Yeah,
this?
because that's the thing. Like, it's obviously initially strange to see him there, but at the end of the day, they're not they're not rivals in terms of league position, and you kind of have to cut him some slack and be like, look, really, one of the big reasons he took the job is that he gets to be back in Liverpool. As I said to you earlier, like, he loves the city, he loves the people of Liverpool. You know, he hasn't been manager there for 10 years, but he never sold his house. He still always had a house in Liverpool. So he loves the city, and it's just in terms of from that point of view, you kind of have to just be happy for him in terms of he's getting to go back to the city that he fell in love with as the Liverpool manager. Um, but yeah, like back then it was Moyes was the Everton manager, and Everton were doing very well for a prolonged period of time. You know, pushing Champions League places, but like Everton have Everton have really fallen away from even that sort of level. So yeah, I think that definitely plays into it. What'll I hit you with? Let me see. Oh, I'm gonna hit you with my new favorite pair. Um, Definitely fantasy football wise, because I've had them in since day one. But especially watching the match the other day, and obviously keeping an eye on them because of fantasy football wise. But they're just a joy to watch. What have you made of the first couple of weeks of West Ham's Mikel Antonio and Saeed Benrahma?
The football perspective, the lads are banging in the points. I thankfully had Antonio, and he's had some great returns. But just in terms of, like, I just think David Moyes deserves so much credit for what he's done with this West Ham team, and especially Benrahma to a certain extent, where he came obviously from Brentford last season. I think it was initially a loan, and then it was made permanent because they wanted to try bring Jesse Lingard in as their third or whatever amount of loan deals that they were allowed. But again, just football nowadays are it's there's no patience with it. That if a player doesn't hit the ground running, there's criticism, and there was a lot of criticism I think for Benrahma last season, and obviously Lingard took his position, but he's come right back in and hit the ground running. And I do think David Moyes deserves a lot of credit for that he stuck with him. I'm sure he chatted to him throughout the season. Even the fact that he's I don't know whether that was Benrahma's idea or was David Moyes' idea or Mikel Antonio's idea, but for him to take the number 9 off his back and give him just a random number 22, I think it is, this season. And then obviously that meant Antonio was given the number 9, and that's like he's gone to another level this season in terms of being an out and out striker. Some of his finishes have been fantastic. But again, I just think the David Moyes redemption almost at West Ham, he's turned that club around. I think there was always question marks about obviously playing in front of no fans with West Ham. That has been benefiting them last season, or had been of benefit to them last season. They've hit the ground running, so fans are obviously happy, but it will be interesting to see how the likes of those players and obviously the rest of the West Ham players and David Moyes react to a poor run of form, because I think the West Ham fans can be some of the most brutal in the Premier League in terms of how they want their club to be run and how they want their players to perform. But obviously back to Benrahma, Antonio, like you said, they're actually a joy to watch. That kind of attacking, just attacking football that they have. And obviously, you guys know from the group as well, I'm a big fan of Declan Rice's, and he plays a big part in a lot of what's been going good in the first 2 games for West Ham. I think Declan Rice deserves a lot of credit as well in terms of his interceptions is his ability to start attacks as well from intercepting footballs. Whereas you'd normally see someone intercepts the ball and they pass it backwards. Whereas he's intercepted it and played a pass forward to get the attack going, almost like a mini counter attack. Yeah, but those players have been a joy to watch, and David Moyes has certainly, like, it's almost back to his Everton days where he's getting the very, very best out of a good bunch of players. He's probably maybe getting a bit better than people would have expected, probably even West Ham fans. But I can definitely see them finishing ahead of their we call them their London rivals this season. Just in relation to Arsenal, but can you see Arsenal going the opening 3 games without a point and without scoring a goal?
Yeah, 100%. Like, had you said it to me at the start of the season, you'd say surely they'd pick up something, but they've nothing so far, and they're playing City now away on Saturday morning. So yeah, 100%. 3 games, 3 losses. They are just abysmal. Arsenal was someone that was something I was going to ask you about as well, actually. I just they're honestly they're a laughing stock. Like, what has happened to Arsenal? Like, you see, oh, I don't know. You can barely even put it into words. They've become such a poorly run club in terms of, they had Emery for far too long. Really, a lot of Arsenal fans, I'm sure, would say that they had him for far too long. Even like Arteta, like, what, they've had 2 8th position place or finishes since he's taken over. Like, that's not, he's not still in like a bedding in period. Like, he's had 2 seasons. I can't remember if it was the first one a full season or not, but he's there a while. Do you know what I mean? And honestly, they're looking worse and worse every year. Like, I think I was saying to you there before we started chatting on the podcast, like, they used to be, obviously, us growing up, we knew them as, genuinely unbelievable team. It was, when I was growing up, it was United and Arsenal were the 2, just undeniably the 2 best teams in England. 2 best teams to look at, the 2 strongest teams, 2 most powerful teams. I always remember it was kind of, you have, Vieira on Arsenal, Roy Keane at United, Thierry Henry for Arsenal, Van Nistelrooy at United. It was just, the teams they had at the time were phenomenal. Where, obviously they've dropped off as the years have gone on. Won a few FA Cups here and there, which always kind of masks the fact that they're still slowly declining. Obviously, saying it from a Liverpool point of view, before we won it there in 2020, the last time we won the league was 1990. But we won, we still got to a few finals. I think we won the League Cup in 95, I think it was. We got to the FA Cup final with the Spice Boys and stuff like that. Won the treble of the Cups in 2001. League Cup 2003, Champions League 2005. So it was still, we were still kind of picking up good trophies, every couple of years kind of thing, which is what Arsenal had been doing for a while. They won the Europa League. Did they win the Europa League? I think they did. Well, anyway, they won 3 FA Cups in 4 years or something. Oh yeah, no, they lost the Europa League to Chelsea. That's what it was. But yeah, like, so what I'm saying is they've kind of flattered to deceive in terms of still winning the trophies. So it kind of masks the fact that they're noticeably declining, where you still would have always considered them still one of kind of the big 6 team kind of, or, we would have known them as one of the, classic top 4 teams. Where I think that knowing them kind of as one of the top 6 teams really kind of hid the fact that they're really not top quality anymore. Where this season, I think, surely to God, who I don't think anyone in the league at all should fear Arsenal. I think the veil has finally come off, and where people were still thinking, oh, Arsenal are still pretty much one of the top six. Like, Arsenal, in my opinion, are just a standard run-of-the-mill mid-table team now, which is sad because, you know, they were always a class team to watch. As I said, the likes of Henry and stuff. Henry was one, like, other than Liverpool, was one of my favourite players to watch growing up. You know, they were always kind of, for a while, they always seemed to be kind of your second team almost. I'd say it was probably different for you being a United fan and them being direct rivals with you at the time. But, you know, it was always kind of a thing of, you know, I knew a few Liverpool fans, maybe a couple of Chelsea fans and stuff. And it was a case of, you know, oh, if I didn't support such and such, yeah, it'd probably be Arsenal. You know, they were always just kind of the best to watch in the league. So really, like, we obviously knew it at the time because Wenger was, you know, one of the longest serving managers in Premier League history, along with Ferguson. But it's really, really become starkly obvious just how good he was. Whatever the record was that he had them in the top four every single year for, was it 16 or 17 years or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
This season, the first season since, is it like 95 that Arsenal haven't qualified for a European competition, hence why they're playing tonight in the second round of the EFL Cup or
the Cup, yeah, sorry, that's what it is, yeah,
whatever it's called these days. But again, you look back, and I know Roy Keane goes on about character, but that's what Arsenal, I know a lot of teams are lacking characters or leaders, but Arsenal are lacking a lot of characters. You mentioned obviously Wenger and his record and stuff like that, and kind of towards the end it wasn't going as nicely, but you could also say
still getting them top four. You know what I mean?
And
so, like, he was basically a football genius. That he continued to do it.
100%. And what you could say is the grass isn't always greener on the other side, where fans wanted him out, and there was a lot of disrespect towards what Wenger had done. Personally, I think he should have stepped down himself maybe 2 years before he did, when he won one of those FA Cups, kind of just to finish on a high. But obviously he didn't. But you're looking back, and I'm sure Arsenal fans right now, all of them would snap their hand off at having Wenger back and consistently getting top four and consistently competing in the cups or winning a cup every second season. I think that snap your hand off at that. But one of the other Arsenal questions I kind of had to it was, Arsenal have spent the most money this transfer window. I think it's over 200 million on players. They brought in the likes of Aaron Ramsdale, which there's was it a meme or a picture going around saying that he joined Chesterfield, they got relegated that season. He joined Bournemouth, they got relegated that season. He joined Sheffield United, they got relegated this season. Question mark, he joins Arsenal. Don't think
Arsenal are that poor. You know what I mean? Like, they've really fallen from grace. That like they're in the bottom three at the moment. You'd say obviously they won't stay there, but at the same time, like,
they could potentially. I know it's not financial difficulty or whatever compared to Leeds back at the was it the early noughties, where they end up getting obviously relegated, but that was more to do with their finances, I think, and having to get rid of a lot of good players, where Arsenal are spending 200 plus million on players. And this is the question I had for you. Should Arsenal be spending their money wiser, as opposed to paying 35 million for Odegaard, where they have Emile Smith-Rowe? Yeah, potentially you can say two players, similar positions. I know they're different type of players, but should that 35 million be spent on a right back, a quality centre midfielder, and potentially even a striker? Because Aubameyang has gone backwards since he signed his new deal. Lacazette is in and out of the team. And then we obviously touched on Ramsdale there, which I think is 25 mil. That goes potentially up to 30 million.
Yeah.
But to have Leno, who's going to be their number one goalkeeper, you would think, for the season. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's ridiculous. I think when I saw, obviously the image came out with, the list of kind of who's spent the most. It had kind of gone under the radar for me that Arsenal had spent the most. But yeah, when you look at it, it goes back to what I was saying. Like it's become a really poorly run club. Like the amount of money they've spent, and like that, like how can you justify spending 30 million on a backup keeper when they've numerous spots in the starting 11 that need looking at far more urgently. Like the contracts as well are something that have really not pissed me off, because I don't really care as much about Arsenal as I used to, but like it would piss me off if I was an Arsenal fan. Do you know what I mean? Like that, they spend money ridiculously. I think I saw Bakary Sanya come out and say as well, like he's kind of, why are they spending all this money on kind of future players? Like, okay, yeah, they might do well now, but it's spending most of your money on projects or players you're looking to develop. Like the team is really struggling right now. Like they need to they should have been spending the money on strong players to come in. They were unlucky, I think, with how injury prone Partey has been. When they signed him last year, I thought he was a really good signing and I thought he would make a difference. And he has looked good when he's played, but he's been very injury prone since they've signed him. But what I was going to say in terms of contract situation, like last year, whether it was last year or the year before, Aubameyang anyway, I think he was about 31 I think at the time, and they made him, I think, like absolutely the top earner at the club, but he was one of the top earners across the league. I think whatever contract they gave him, he was somewhere within the top 10 anyway, if not the top 5. And like this is a guy who really hasn't set the world alight. He was joint top scorer a few years ago. But even then, that was because it was joint with Salah and Mane, but it was a modest goal return. It wasn't, Salah the previous year where he got 32. I think all three of them were tied on 22. But like to have made a guy, 31 going on 32, as far as I'm aware, I haven't double checked it. Making him one of the highest paid players in the league. They signed like a 30-year-old Willian from Chelsea and made him one of the highest paid players. Like, where are they going with these types of deals? That then Willian is there a year or two, has done very, very little, next to nothing. And now, like, it's looking like he's going to go like Corinthians or somewhere like that, or like he's hoping to go to a European team, but apparently Corinthians is looking the most likely. So like they're spending this amount of money on the player initially and having them on these huge wages. Willian looks like he's leaving. Aubameyang, they've talking him going to Barcelona. Surely that's not going to happen, because I don't know how Barcelona think they could possibly have any money. But just those two, even as examples, it's become really obvious how poorly run it's become. And really, I think the whole thing comes down to the loss of Wenger, when you think about it, because he was quite involved higher up in the club as well. Obviously, we saw him on social media yesterday because he was presenting all the FIFA's world best trophies to a few of the Liverpool players and stuff. Excuse me. And you kind of, it's always funny when someone like that hasn't been kind of in the public eye for a while. You're like, oh yeah, I remember Wenger. He was brilliant, and he's just such a classy guy with kind of, his head screwed on. He had a good business mind as well as being a great manager. So yeah, I think even regardless of the first team, they've missed him from that point of view. But yeah, to wrap it up on Arsenal, I think the club's become an absolute shambles, to be honest. And I don't see any of the signings they've made making a difference in terms of league position. I think slap bang in the centre of mid-table, if not mid to lower table. one from Arsenal. Arsenal playing Man City this weekend. City just have a wealth of options in midfield, especially. And obviously, it kind of opens up an extra spot with the fact that Kane isn't going. In terms of, Ferran Torres has been playing kind of the false nine. Pep seems to just want to get as many midfielders into his team as possible. I suppose, fantasy football wise, are you looking at getting any City players if you don't have any? Obviously, it's so hard to call. Like, Grealish has started both games. Mahrez didn't start last week, still came on and scored. It's hard to call, isn't it? I haven't gone near Man City so far in fantasy football, but with these kind of games, you're gonna have to kind of start picking one or two, really, aren't you?
I always think to be in with a chance to win fantasy football, maybe not necessarily we'll say the normal fantasy football, but sometimes to win the fantasy football drafts game, to have the players from the best teams is the best way, I think, to win that type of league. In terms of City players, I brought in Ferran Torres last week because obviously I saw they were against Norwich. Norwich had leaked 3 goals against Liverpool on the opening weekend. City at home against Norwich. You could see a 4-5-0 win, which happened. Ferran Torres did score, but I think it was obviously disallowed. I can't remember whether it was offside or it was a foul in the build-up. But like you said, that was one of my reasons for bringing him in, because he was probably the best player for City against Spurs the previous week. And also he seems to be playing that false 9 role at the moment. And I think he was 7 mil at the time. I took out Barnes, who actually went down in price today, I think. So I had Ferran Torres in. I'll keep him in for the Arsenal game because I think he will start again. I think he could start that false 9 role again. Pep obviously doesn't fancy Jesus at all. I know he praised him last weekend, but I can only see Jesus coming on and playing those sort of games where City are expected to win 3-4-5-6-0 against a team battling relegation. But again, Pep Roulette, like, you can't pick any City. Like, you can't even pick John Stones and Diaz at this stage, because wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, no, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he turned around and went Stones Laporte for the next 3 games. It genuinely wouldn't surprise me.
But he played Ake in the first game of the season, didn't he? And like anyone who had Stones, who thought Stones and Diaz were the nailed on starters, it was like, I even forgot they had Ake. You know what I mean?
So I kind of said, right, no City players, but then obviously Ferran Torres played so well in the Spurs game, and I saw him as a try. I saw what position he was playing, and I did take a bit of a gamble with him.
No, I was considering getting him as well. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but I can't see myself putting any other City players in unless someone is a consistent, like, if I don't know, if Gundogan hit the form that he did last season with Kevin De Bruyne potentially. I know he's been training and stuff like that, but yeah, no, I honestly can't picture picking any City players. Fernandes or Salah as captain this week for FPL? Are you going? I think this weekend will really start you'll see a difference in between certain places in our, obviously, in the Fantasy Kickabout League, because it's either been Salah or Fernandes you've captained in week 1 and week 2. Obviously, week 1, if you captained either, it was a great kind of return. Week 2, you would have been better off captaining Salah based on Fernandes getting his yellow card and obviously conceding a goal. So he lost his bonus clean sheet, if you want to call it that. But I think this weekend will be really, really interesting, because people have the option of potentially a Spurs player, Son. If people have Kane in their team, potentially Kane. Obviously you would be, I'm not going to say a bit mad, but you would be taking a gamble if you went captain in a Liverpool or a Chelsea player potentially in that game, just because it has goals written all over it, but both of them haven't conceded a goal this season. So
yeah,
it could be potentially boring at all. You have obviously the likes of Antonio hitting form. Who are you going to go for? Would you go for Fernandes or Salah this weekend?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? I'm ruling out Salah straight away. Even though in the past that tends to come back and bite you, just because he's such a phenomenal player. He just seems to be able to score against anyone, which he can. Like, he has scored against, pretty much everyone that he's played against over the few years he's been at Liverpool. But fantasy football wise, it's always kind of something you stay away from, isn't it? Like, when, even if it's one of the elite players, if they're coming up against, who you consider kind of one of the big rivals in the league, it's kind of hard to justify captaining them. So yeah, I won't be going near Salah this week, unfortunately, because I still think he'll be, in terms of points wise, fantasy football wise, he'll be right up there at the end of the season. So I'd say more often than not over the season I'll probably have captain Salah, but I won't be doing it this weekend. Fernandes is an interesting one. You definitely consider it. Like, given the players I currently have, he's definitely in with a shout. Wolves away is, Wolves have been a bit off at the start of the season, so I would say it's an easier fixture than say it was last year, the year before. But still a hard one to call. Wolves could just decide, right, we're gonna make a go of this. It's at Molineux. Wolves, as far as I'm, from an outsider looking in, Wolves have tended to do relatively well against United over the last couple of years. I remember a couple of Neves goals. So I don't know. I still think if you're only choosing between those two, you go Fernandes. But I still think Fernandes is a bit of an iffy choice. To be honest, I haven't decided yet, but I think Antonio is a really strong captain choice this week. Like, as he said, himself and Benrahma have been unbelievable. I think Benrahma has 12 in both the games, and Antonio has something like 13 in the first week and 16 last week. So form-wise, they're absolutely in the running. And they're at home to Crystal Palace. So I'll be strongly thinking of captaining Antonio if I don't kind of change the team up. I'm happy, like the way I have my team set up, I'm happy with it generally. Like, obviously I've done well in the first 2 weeks. I'm happy with it kind of the first 5, 6, 7 weeks with as little tinkering as possible. I do have two free transfers this week, so could end up switching it around. I'd say it's likely I'll do something anyway. But it's hard. Like, even someone who hasn't done it for me so far is Tony, who's been he's just gotten 2 in both the games. But at the same time, if you look at the games, he's been their most dangerous forward. So he's kind of one just to keep an eye on for another week or two. Whether it's going to be a case of, you see this player and he's like, oh, he's going to be a class fantasy asset, but actually he's just going to get you a load of 2s, and maybe once in a while he'll get 2 goals or he'll get a hat-trick or something like that. But generally he'll just get you a load of 2s. So he might be someone I'm transferring out at some stage. But yeah, I think currently it's probably between Fernandes and Antonio. I'm not looking at getting Lukaku in yet. I'll probably hold off for a few weeks. Obviously, he looked unbelievable against Arsenal. I'd say he'll trouble Liverpool a bit, but I'd be confident in keeping him out. But Chelsea are coming into a short patch of quite difficult looking games. They have obviously Liverpool this weekend and Tottenham, Aston Villa and City, as far as I'm aware. But then they have a really good patch then. So I'd say it's quite likely I'll get in Lukaku at that stage. So hopefully he continues to play really well, but doesn't score much.
Just one final question, and you can just give me one name or maybe 2 if you can't decide on one. But it was my last question. If you had to name a player of the season, it's a bit of a ridiculous question all the same, but if you had to name a player of the season based on 2 games, who wins it for you?
Player of the season, basically so far. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bit of a ridiculous question, but
I know it's good. Yeah. So who has stood out the most after the 2 games? I'd say Mikel Antonio. That's my shout. Yeah, I think because obviously both Fernandes and Salah were class in the first week, but didn't do it in the second week.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for consistency over the course of the season, in the 2-game season we've just had, I think Antonio
top scorer as well. So
this is it. Can't argue with the facts, can you?
He's doing all right, but we might wrap it up there, O'Hara. But
yeah, perfect.
Really interesting kind of Q&A between the both of us based on things that happen in game week 1, game week 2, and a bit of a obviously preview towards game week 3 in terms of fantasy football as well. But as always, O'Hara, pleasure chatting on the podcast, and look forward to the Liverpool Chelsea game on the weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Chat to you later.